Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would talk briefly about a little bit of a side tangent, if Aries is going to let me. But invariably what happens whenever I discuss a video and I point out that the more protein you eat, the slower you absorb it over time, what I mean is not that you absorb it slower as in you'll get less grams of it per hour. It means that because protein is generally slow absorbing other than a few exceptions in terms of digestion and assimilation by your GI tract, that when you consume large amounts of it, you're still absorbing it at the same rate, but it takes longer to get all of it. Meaning it could take you 4 times as long, up to, not necessarily, but potentially up to 4 times as long to absorb 80 grams of protein as it will 20 grams of protein from the same source, depending upon, the composition of your meal, what you ate before. There's a lot of factors involved. But it's going to absorb more slowly the total amount of protein that you took in. And when I mentioned the one in that video the other day of discussing protein absorption myths, and I'll link that video down below, people invariably will link studies to me and they'll say, yeah, but how come this study shows that only a small amount of protein elevates muscle protein synthesis, and when you go beyond, say, 20 grams, we don't see improved muscle protein synthesis in the short term? Doesn't that prove that wrong? Doesn't it prove that protein timing matters? Well, to some extent, I do think protein timing matters. I would never really recommend that anybody try to get all of their protein in one meal per day. I generally advocate around 3 meals a day. We still don't have conclusive data on any of this. But if I had to make an educated guess, probably around 3 meals a day is going to give you ideal muscle protein synthesis. But the point is, you will absorb it over time. And so people always want to link a study like that. And I'm going to link the study that was linked in this last one. And there's tons of these studies out there. We get into some of the private groups I chat in, we get into depth discussions on this stuff. And there's something I find interesting in these. So this one that's linked down below, this one showed that post-training, and you guys need to remember absorption slows down a bit post-training anyways. Nothing really spikes very well for a little while after you train. But they gave it enough time frame that you would get outside of that post-training window to where digestion would speed back up. But it showed that different protein intakes at 20 grams seemed to be the cap at which they saw total muscle protein synthesis, total leucine metabolism, things like that over the next 4 hours of egg white protein. They showed that at 20 grams there was no significant, statistically significant difference between 20 grams and 40 grams in that one sitting post-workout in terms of total muscle protein synthesis, leucine metabolism, things like that over the next 4 hours. And everyone always says, aha, well, doesn't that show that the timing of the meals matters? And I would say maybe it does. But something else that it also shows is something that I try to talk to you guys about, and something that a lot of sports nutritionists try to talk about, is why we recommend much lower protein intakes than some of the data suggest, and lower protein intakes than a lot of the experts and really good experts out there who have associations still with companies that sell supplements, which will always potentially bias people financially. I've even got good friends who are like that. They believe in slightly higher protein, but they also have financial ties to the supplement industry, and you can't overlook that when we're discussing data. Or at least they're biased towards certain ends of data, and people could argue that I'm biased towards the other extreme because of my views on veganism, and that's true. We're all subject to bias. As humans, we're all going to interpret this total sum of data differently based upon our personal biases. Every human being on Earth, even the best researchers, are guilty of this. Human nature. But something I would point out is that, well, I would have liked to have seen in this other study them throw a 100-gram group in and then map it out for 12 hours. Because it comes back to the point of it's not necessarily that the sitting that was a problem, it was the time frame is a problem, that maybe over a 4-hour window you can only utilize 20 of the grams towards muscle protein synthesis, and had you extended past the 4 hours, the 40 grams might have continued to increase it longer, which also begs the question of if egg protein, which again, that choice, that is the highest bioavailability and adjusted amino acid profile score of any protein known to man. Egg whites is insane. So obviously less egg whites is going to do a better job at muscle building gram per gram than any other protein source. But that also shows that perhaps no more, because it's so efficient, no more than 20 grams of egg protein can actually benefit you in terms of everything from body functions to muscle building and muscle protein synthesis in every 4 hours. So what does that tell you about your daily intake? Well, even if you spread that out and you ate it in 5 meals, because every 4 hours, and then you're going to have to sleep unless you're going to get up 4 hours into your night's sleep, which I wouldn't recommend. That's only going to give you 5 meals 4 hours apart at 20 grams at the cap. That's only 100 grams of protein. It would go 120 if you woke up in the middle of the night, if you go off of their numbers there. And I recommend, just like many sports nutritionists do, that for building muscle mass, ideally building muscle mass at a fantastic rate, that you need 1 gram to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for someone my size, a 100 kilo power lifter, that's 100 to 160 grams. You go back and look at this data, 100 grams, 120 tops being beneficial. If you were to look at that from the perspective, what if you space this out through the day and ran it in 24-hour cycles instead of just looking at their 4-hour window, you're still showing that potentially no more than 100 to 120 grams of protein in a day is going to have any benefit towards total muscle protein synthesis. That is also what this sort of data could suggest. I'm not saying that proves it, because it doesn't, but it certainly suggests it, and that is a very logical extrapolation to draw from this when you see data like this. So that's one of the other points I would point out to people when they do data like this. I'm not saying you don't absorb all the protein that you eat. You obviously do. If you ate 500 grams in one sitting, you're going to absorb it over a couple days. And you're going to use it for various functions, but it's still not necessarily going to help you build muscle mass beyond around that first 100 grams. And that's kind of the point that I get to with some of this. And so when people link me data like this, it kind of gives me something to point back that maybe what this data is also showing you is that you don't need as much protein as you actually think you need for maximal muscle building. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.